raised, and I won't go into a lot of details about him and his shenanigans around Stafford County. Well, his father, he grew up right in sight of the church. And I suppose that he became a family member of the people that attended here. Most of them were his kinfolks, because this was back in the 50s. He's been around a while, not quite as old as I am, but I remember him growing up, and quite talented young man. He grew up about half a mile down Elon Road, on site of the church. And his family, they were church members. Like most of our neighborhood at that time, the Hulls Church was a gathering place, not only on Sunday, but any time that the people of the neighborhood would like to get together. Well, it would happen here. Later on in that era, the community center became a place of a community center beside it was a school, elementary school where I attended, and I think Jim attended that school also for about 4 or 5 years. And then we went on to Falmouth High School over on Route 17. But Jim's duty to the church, when you come to church here on Sunday morning, the first person that greets you at the door will be Jim. Hands you a bulletin and asks you if you need to be seated. He'll show you a place where you can be comfortably seated. He joined church in 1961 and became a deacon in 1963. He and his wife for years worked the nursery here at the church and took care of the youngsters while we attended service. He was a member of the cemetery committee. And for so many years, the membership cut the grass, took care of the cemetery, took care of everything here at the church. We didn't hire anybody for anything. The membership took care of facilities. So he worked at the cemetery. He was on the facilities committee. Here, cut grass, trimmed the shrub, you name it. Jim was our man. Whatever needed to be done, he was always ready to go. He was our worker. You can remember the brotherhood that we've had and was very active in that. We also had a church softball team, which he played and was a very important member of that team. We have a lot of fond memories of our games that we played around the neighborhood. And I feel honored to be a friend. And probably if you look back in the genealogy, you'll find that I'm kin. My mother was a Snelling, so that puts me into just about anybody that was here in the 1960s. So, Jim, thank you for your services. And God bless you. And I'll stay right here because my name is on the list again. I have the honor of another person that I call Big Brother. And just like Jim, this man grew up next door to Jim, down Eden Road. He's a little bit my elder, but I think once you get to that number, that age really doesn't make any difference. As a friend of mine told me, someone's better health than others. And we've had our good times and our rough times too. But he joined church way back.
Not on the record.
Way back in the 50s. And the whole family were church members. In his early days, they would walk to church because it was only maybe quarter of a mile from the church. And the church was such an important place for John. And it shows in his later life. He just took over here as Mr. Anything. He's so talented. He can do most anything. He's a carpenter, he's an electrician, he's a plumber, he's you name it. And he was also on the softball team. That was our recreation. John joined church in 1950 after serving in the military. Became a deacon. He's been a deacon for over 50 years. And another unique thing, I don't think he ever planned on this, but for over 50 years he had a perfect attendance here at our church Sunday school class. Can you imagine every Sunday? So that describes how he loved his church. And Sunday school teacher, he knows the Bible, he reads it, and he can certainly explain things to you. King James Version sometimes gets to be hard to understand or interpret, but John has his interpretation of it and will pass it on to you anytime. You remember the building committee that built this church? Our little church, when he was growing up, was over by the cemetery. And the population grew to where the church became too small, so John was on the committee that planned, that built this church. And was very much a part of the works of it, and he still is. When we need something that's broke, something needs to be done, we call John and say, hey. And he's the first one here to fix it. He's a very good fix-it man. We even had the roof some years ago. We noticed that some of the shingles after a hard wind had blown off the roof of this two-story building. The next day, John got his ladder and was up on this roof repairing it. And question that, John, you don't need at your age to climb in these ladders like that. You're not as good as you used to be. But hey, no, I'll do it. I can do it. The other tricky thing to do is trim the two trees right at the entrance to our church on each side. You have to put a ladder up into the tree and balance that ladder in the tree to trim it. John's an expert at it. He's done it so many times. So I just could stand here and talk all day about John. Feel like I'm blessed to have a man and also a kinfolk with his talent. Thank you very much.
Amen.
David's name is in the bulletin too, but he's going to stay up there. I'm going to do this by myself. I'm here to honor Leroy Snellers. I met Leroy before I remember. And he was, by the way, always Leroy in this community. It's only in very recent years that some few of us who grew up in Terrapin Thickets have started to call him his preferred Roy. Nikki told me one time she always knew when the phone rang, if they asked for Leroy, it was someone from church. If they asked for Roy, it was someone from work. And if they asked for Mr. Snellings, it was a solicitor. She's shaking her head. She doesn't remember. Anyway, I met him before I remember. My dad moved back to this community after marrying my mom. They lived in Fredericksburg for a while, and they came back here when I was a year old. And although I don't remember quite that far back, I do have pictures of Roy's sister, Ann, and I playing together at about age 2. As we grew up, Ann and I spent virtually every Sunday afternoon together. Either she came home with me from church, or I went home with her from church, and we stayed together until BTU on Baptist Training Union, for those of you who don't know what that is, on Sunday nights. Her mom, Julia, was my second mother. think I called her mom about half the time. We played outside most of the time because we were little tomboys. But on rainy or cold days when we were stuck inside, we would have to entertain ourselves otherwise, which was not necessarily easy at the Snelling's house on a Sunday, because Roy's father, Emmett, was a very strict man, and there was no foolishness allowed on Sunday in his house. There was no playing old maids or running as we got older and wanted to dance or sing. She and I sang together all the time, wanted to sing some rock and roll songs. No, none of that on Sundays. But Ann had two big brothers, and as much as we could, we would try to pull them into whatever we were doing. Brother Donnie is gone now, but my memories of him from those days are quite vivid. He was tall and handsome and musical, and he had no time for his sister or her friends. But then there was Leroy, who actually seemed to like us. And I remember one of my very early memories is of Leroy teasing and laughing together in their living room when we were just the little girls. He went to Bluefield College with a plan, I understand from his daughter Ann, I didn't know this until a couple days ago, to become a minister. But decided not to do that, and he joined the Air Force instead. So our connection, his direct connection with this community stopped for a few years because he did serve in the military for a long time. Years later, I remember being very jealous of Ann when she got to go visit him in Little Rock, Arkansas, because he would not take me. He became a communications officer and always in his civilian life a big ham radio buff. For those of you who don't know, most of you probably do, but his father, Emmett, passed away here at the church on the front steps. And of course, Roy came home for the funeral. I have a vivid memory of standing at the graveside, not directly after the funeral, but some hours later, there again trying to support my friend in the loss of her father, and Leroy cracking jokes, one after the other, so that we were all in stitches. His mother, who was laughing in spite of herself, finally said, "Okay, Leroy, that's enough." And he reluctantly stopped, but not for very long. I also remember meeting Nikki for the first time when he brought her home from France. She seemed to be a tiny, quiet, timid little woman at first impression. And then you actually learned that she was not timid at all. And she was and is, I think, the perfect complement to Leroy's boisterous personality. And that's basically what I think of when I think of Leroy, laughter. I've never known anybody with a more congenial personality than Leroy. He's lived everywhere. In the States, he's lived in Arkansas, where Ann was born. And in Michigan, this is all what is in the service of course, Michigan, Florida, Texas, Maryland, Colorado, overseas in France, where we met Nikki, of course, in Japan, where Karen was born, in Germany, where Ken was born, Vietnam twice, and Spain. Thank you, Anne, for all that information. I did not know all that. I can imagine Roy's personality helping him to fit in anywhere. I have no military experience. My dad served his time during World War II before I was born. But I know military life probably has its challenges and its rewards. And yet when he retired from the Air Force, even though he could have been comfortably living anywhere in the world, he chose to come back to this little corner of Stafford County. I believe that this community and this church played a big factor in his decision to do that. I think he wanted, he'll tell me later, you're completely wrong about that. But I think he wanted to live in the house where he'd grown up and serve in the church where his father had served and his mother. His father served as a Sunday school teacher, and so is Roy, as Sunday school director, and so is Roy, on many varied teams and committees, as a deacon for many years, as chair of the deacon several times, and most recently as a charter member of our bell ringers, our chime ringers. He stopped doing that, I'm disappointed, but I think we can coax him back. I remember him saying what an honor it was to be ordained as a deacon, giving him the opportunity to serve in the same capacity that his father had. He was elected as chair, as I said, several times in support of several different pastors. Roy has been exactly the kind of example throughout his life that we all need. Someone who makes a commitment to his country, his family, his community, his church, and who does it all with a strong determination, a devotion to God, and an easy laugh.